I think it's fair to say, or given the very devastating revelations in Jenna's first video, and she did a follow up, which we will get to, there's been a big backlash against Aaron. And again, for the most part, I agree with it. That said, there is some opportunism going on. And again, I'm not going to be too critical of Nora here, but, and again, I would say her commentary is better than her other commentaries, but she was doing a few iffy things, but that's my humble opinion. So let me summarize very quickly what happened in the first video, because Jen is basically responding to a lot of the responses of that video and trying to clarify a few things, because a few things were left murky. So in the first video, she just details her shock that Aaron has persistently cheated on her, and apparently it was so pervasive in terms of him being, well, incredibly controlling and manipulative that even his children were aware of the situation, and they told Jenna's children, because Jenna has children from another marriage, of what was occurring. And well, it's pretty disturbing. So we're going to hear a little bit from Jenna herself.
Kids warn my kids. They said that we hope that he treats your mom better than he treats our mom.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. It's very disturbing all around. So the first video gave sort of details on Aaron's behavior, but the second video sort of gave more of Jenna's point of view and her responding to some criticisms. Again, I'm going to mostly be summarizing. I will do more full commentaries later, but let's get to what she said. So she's making several major points. With the major points, I don't really disagree, but she made a few minor points. I'm like, I think that's more questionable. But let's get to the main points or the major points. So one, yes, she did try to handle these things privately, right? She didn't just put out the video she put out a few days ago. She did try to talk to Aaron privately, but he would keep yelling and screaming or not want to speak. So that was just too persistent. She tried several times. Then she put out the video. So that answers that question. Then she gets to, and this is true, this is empirically true. We have a lot of objective, independent evidence, although, right, if you know the channel, I'm skeptical we can ever get, quote, really objective evidence, but that's me. Still, we have some firm evidence that, and again, it's a little brutal, because people in the comment section saying, well, they both were in the cult and da da da. Aaron is not much of a victim, right? If you actually go through his story, his, quote, victimization in Scientology is pretty small. So Jenna points out very brutally saying, well, if the issue is, well, he's traumatized too, she experienced way more trauma than he did in Scientology. And this is true. Depending on how you measure trauma, she experienced it much more viscerally. Like she was doing hard labor as a small child. Like she was being forced to pick up big boulders as a little kid. Aaron never did that, right? Aaron had some bad experiences in Scientology, but even the things he complains about are like, okay. And he has suffered tragedy, but Scientology didn't play the role people think it did. So he's very much skewing what happened in Scientology. He's exaggerating what happened. It is what it is. So she's brutally pointing out, well, if you think trauma is what's causing this, that it doesn't make any sense because she is much more traumatized than he is. It's a little harsh to say that, but it is true. And she also makes some positive affirmations of herself, saying, listen, this is my channel, and the goal of the channel is to talk about herself and her experience in Scientology. It's not to talk about what Aaron wants to talk about in Scientology. Now that's a little bit misleading. They did a few videos together, and it didn't seem to me she was being overly coerced. Granted, we now know that there's a lot more manipulation, so that's a little more ambiguous. But yes, clearly Aaron wanted to skew the topics a certain way when they talked about their experiences and, quote, their experiences in Scientology. And she's saying she's not going to do that anymore. She's going to do the content the way she wants to do. She doesn't want to be managed or directed there. But the channel is mainly about her and the experiences she wants to talk about, whether Scientology or not. So what does that really mean? Well, If you're going to go to her for, quote, anti-Scientology activism, you may be out of luck. That may be a small part of the channel, but that's not really the main focus. Now, that might be a point for Aaron, but see, I don't think Aaron is interested in doing anti-Scientology activism. I think that's just a cover story, but that's my opinion. But that was the goal and aim of the channel, but it sort of got drifted away because Aaron wanted to influence it or push it a certain direction. And then she responds to critics who said, well, isn't this just a private issue? Why are we learning about this? And to her, and again, she is using the word abuse. And again, I don't really dispute a lot. I think what she's saying about Aaron, for the most part, is very accurate, right? Because I've done my own reporting, I've done my own videos on it, and it does seem to line up with what other women, and not just women, but with other people, Jerry Armstrong, Mike Rinder, you go through the list, Doug Scott Kramer, they've had similar criticisms and noticed similar things. So it's not just her. That said, there is a bit of mythologizing she's doing for herself, which to some degree is fair. So she points out that in terms of activism, she actually did things before Aaron did. That is true. She publicly did do some activism before he, quote, formally left Scientology. Like, Aaron left the Sea Org in the 2000s, but he didn't, like, truly leave Scientology until a few years later. By that time, Jenna was already out, and she was starting to do some activism. And that is true, though here I will be a little critical that, and again, we can blame a lot of this on Aaron, and we should blame Aaron, but it's not all Aaron's fault here either. But some of her more recent things she's doing are really against the spirit and even contradicting what she did earlier. So it's a little mixed bag. But yes, her early activism is on record. You can look up her interviews. She's there. She is protesting. So she's pointing that out, that she actually did a lot of things before Aaron did. So that is true. That is true. So what to make of all this? Well, this video is a little, I don't want to say problematic, but it's a little more polished. Like the first video she put out seemed off the cuff. She just recorded it, she put it out, it's there. This one is more edited. So it is a more professional presentation. And again, I'm not here to really criticize her looks, but the first video, she wasn't really concerned with how she looked. This one, she definitely put on a little bit more makeup. She's more concerned with how she's coming across, which is fine, right? Just because you're editing something more professionally doesn't make it deceptive, but it is much more structured than the other video. So it is there to tell you a certain narrative. So you have to be aware of that. And what do I make of it? Like I said, I think what she's saying with Aaron is fairly powerful and effective and accurate. But when she talks about herself, she is not telling the full story. Like, for instance, her speaking out. Well, yes, but a lot of her family left Scientology. They've also spoken out. Like Sterling has spoken out, and Ron Miscavige spoke out. He spoke out way before she did. He put out a book as well. And I think, honestly, Ron's revelations, because he's the father of David, are way more devastating. Like, what he has to say is really shocking. So he really opened up the door to other people. Now, Ron is a very troubled, problematic figure. Like, he did a lot of things in Scientology and out of Scientology that people may not approve of, and that's fine. I'm just talking about the revelations themselves are actually more substantive. Like, Jenna's story is fascinating, but as she points out, she's actually more interested in who she is and exploring where she's going. Like, Scientology plays a big role in that, but she's only interested in talking about Scientology to a small degree. So there we are. So that is the substance of the video, and I'm sure we're going to be reacting to that for quite a while. I'm a little mixed about where we're going to go from here. I'm glad she's affirming who she is. No issue with that. And pushing back on Aaron. No issue with that. But again, I would be a little more skeptical of following her lead, wherever it's going to go in terms of her, quote, own activism. I find where her activism is going nowadays a little more troublesome, but that is me, and we will get to that in future videos. But it's fairly devastating, but it is a much more polished, structured style than the first video, where the first video seemed very genuine, just straight from the heart. This is what happened. I'm just going to put this out there, uh, and there we are. This one seems a lot more slick version of what she wanted to put out, but that's me.